I realize that this pisses off Washington fans because they're 3-0 against him so far. But what he did against against Ohio State was pretty spectacular. So for those who don't know, what Dan Lanning did is he put 12 people on. He calls timeout. This is as the game is winding down. And Ohio State is getting close to an attempt at what would be a game-winning field goal. Oregon's up 1 point here. Dan Lanning calls timeout, puts 12 men on the field, knowing he's going to get called for it. But the play takes seconds off the clock. And so he's happy for that to give up those yards for the 12 men on the field to take the seconds off the clock. Now, if you don't know your history, you've not seen this before, but this is what Buddy Ryan did when he was the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. He called it the Polish goal line. He put 14 players in on the goal line, knowing they would call it to shorten the game. He essentially wanted to make it where the opponent only had one play left. Because remember, a defensive penalty, you can't end on a defensive penalty. So basically ran the clock out and made it where the opponent had one play left. And if you stop that play, you win. And that is kind of where Dan Lanning went with this one. And it was brilliant. One more Buddy Ryan thing. He actually did it with a punt at one point also. Put 14 men on the punt team. The officials didn't see it and didn't call it. Buddy Ryan got asked about it after the game. They're like, do you think you shouldn't have done that? And he's like, no, I should have put 15 out there.
Yeah. So the thing that I'll say is that it's a very savvy call, right? Like to have the frame of reference to know your situation in the game, what you'll want to do in order to shorten that game. And then also having worked and repped that in practice enough to run it efficiently, right? Like they did that intentionally and it helped them win. And I think that it is an interesting viewpoint because Ohio State during the same period of time was 100% rattled by the clock, So like on one hand, you have a coach who has not only done something in the game that is clever, but has envisioned this scenario and worked on it in practice so that his players were aware of what to do and how to execute that plan when the game was on the line. We're talking just mere seconds left, right? And on the other hand, you have a coach who was surprised by the clock restarting and them scrambling and then eventually running the game out with Will Howard sliding with the time expiring. So like that to me, like of all the criticisms that you want to have of Ryan Day, I think that's probably where I would go first. But also Dan Lanning being a genius because, of course, that's the perfect call. Now, if you have a senior quarterback like Will Howard who recognizes what's being done, I can't imagine. Like I always marvel, Andy, at how quickly people count all the players because every time I try to do it, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9. Like how quickly can a quarterback like acknowledge or understand or feel that there are 12 men on the field? Because if Howard would just spike the ball,
think about if you do things over and over again and everything looks the same way, like that 12th person is going to stick out like a sore thumb. That's why the quarterbacks and the free safeties, who are usually the ones responsible for noticing those things, like they notice them immediately. And there's somebody on the sidelines that's counting, and remember the back judge is also counting the defense.
So how much percent do you put on, like it's a smart play, but what if Will Howard would have spiked the ball? Like if you would have recognized that there are 12, if there were 12 men on the field, spike the ball, take the 5 yards, then move on from there, because they're probably, when you, regardless of where they were on the field, they were probably in a position where it would have made it a field goal attempt. It might have been a really long one, but there was a risk to that. It wasn't just like, we're going to put 12 men out there, we're going to stop a play from happening, and we're going to waste time. It worked perfectly, but if the other team recognizes what you're doing, they can also spike the ball, stop the clock, reset the play clock, take the 5 yards, and do it again. So like that, there is a risk to it, but Ohio State was not in a position, both in what they were doing and what Oregon was doing, to acknowledge that, or not acknowledge it, to recognize that and take it as a benefit. It hurt them.
Yeah. All In says, is it cheating if it's in the rules? Should probably be changed. It's not cheating because it's using the rules to your advantage. Now, is there a way to close the loophole? Maybe. I would need we need to ask somebody who I'll check with our guy John McDade, who's the SEC coordinator of officials, because I'm curious because usually when you come up with a solution for this, somebody who's been an actual official will go, well, you can't do that because the other team will then do this. And my question is, is it possible to even change the rules in this way where when the defense does this, it stops the clock, or you go back to the original time on the clock before the play was run? Like the offense, you don't let the offense do that because obviously the offense would just use that to run out the clock. But could you do that? I don't know if that's something that you could use to close the loophole. Because remember, Buddy Ryan did this 30 years ago, and they never changed the rules in the NFL.
Well, here's the point, Andy, and I think Connor here in the chat said it best. This is the entire point we're trying to make. It doesn't matter if the situation had to be right, to have the composure to make the call as a coach at that point in the game, ice in the veins. Like, I think that is the takeaway.
I agree completely. Because you can look like a moron. Like, remember, and now Derek Dooley didn't put 13 guys, and it was his defensive coordinator, didn't put 13 guys on the field on purpose against LSU in 2010. And they ended up looking terrible from that. Well, we'll have to ask our guy T-Bob Aber about that because he was playing in that game. He was the center on that play. But you can also look like a clown. Like, what if Ohio State had scored on the play with 12 men on the field? Like, here's my question. Shouldn't he have put 14 men on the field or 15?
Yeah.
Like
the 12
shouldn't he have done that?
Yeah, it doesn't guarantee you to get a stop. I mean, I think it probably certainly helps. But
it helps a lot. But yeah,
with Ohio State's receivers, I guess I wouldn't put it past them to getting a first down or moving the ball. The thing that is so interesting to me is that Ohio State did have the ball inside the 30, down by 1, with enough time left to at least try to run the ball, call timeout, and attempt a field goal. Now, the offensive pass interference, if you want to get bent out of shape about that, go ahead. But Ohio State got away with an interception touchdown scenario earlier in the game that we don't talk about. So, like, I don't really get wound up on coaching or ref calls. But I think that the main takeaway here is that Dan Lanning, again, ice and veins, and worked on something. And Ohio State was running around with chickens with their heads cut off at the end of the game. Now,
well, they've already got some numbers on the board for this weekend's college football games. Download that PrizePicks app, best daily fantasy game in America. Play $5, get $50 instantly with the code STAPLES. So, Nico's number for passing yards against Alabama, Ari, 199.5. So if you think he's going to do more than that, you would click more than. If you think he's going to do less than that, you would click less than. And then you would just pick one more player. And it could be a college football player, could be an NFL player, could be somebody in soccer, could be in Major League Baseball. As few as 2 squares, and the more squares you pick, the higher the potential payout. But yeah, there are already squares for Tennessee, Alabama, and for Georgia, Texas. So whatever you think Nico's going to do, whatever you think Jalen Milroe is going to do, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, those squares are already there. So Bruce Rivers showing one I lost and one I won from last weekend. Kyle McCord, Garrett Green, and Jeremiah Smith hooked me up last weekend. Haj Malik Williams tried to. But yeah, we gave it a shot. Play 5. Get $50 instantly using the code STAPLES when you download that PrizePicks app. Well, it's the same thing. We killed Marcus Freeman for the game against Ohio State last year, where they only had 10 men on the field, and they didn't have a way to stop the stop play so they could get the 11th guy on the field. So yeah,
like this is Andy, I know we're probably not supposed to react to this stuff, but okay. Comments like this. Glazing Dan Lanning, boy, this is going to get old real fast. Why wouldn't we compliment a guy who just won a top 5 game against Ohio State at home for the first time? Like, what do you want out of the show?
They don't want us to say anything nice about anybody except their team. That, and then it's not everybody. That's a certain kind of person. Like a certain kind of person thinks if you say something nice about one person, it means you think every other person on earth sucks. It's like, sort of the ethos of the internet.
There couldn't be a more appropriate time to discuss Dan Lanning. It's bizarre. Yeah. Okay. But here's the thing. You want to have another take. And this is something that I think is important, not just in the Ohio State perspective or the Oregon perspective, but the entire country. The thing that I love about really high level coaching is when you are playing a game against a team and you do things that the other team couldn't foresee, right? Like you have special packages or you have a ace in your sleeve that you work on in practice every day. He didn't just like come up with this on the sideline, tap someone on the ass and say, go into the football game. This is a situational thing that they repped in practice.
They've clearly prepped for this. So, and it reminded me of, so Belichick did this thing years ago where they used a delay of game, like they took delay of game penalties on offense to try to wind the clock down. And so when Mike Vrabel, who used to play for Bill Belichick, was playing against Bill Belichick as the Titans head coach, he did the same thing to Belichick. Like he drained almost 2 minutes off the clock using this delay of game tactic and was just grinning on the sideline, across the sideline at Bill Belichick. Like, you taught me. I learned it from watching you, Dad.
Yeah, well, you'll have to explain that one to me because I'm not familiar with how a delay of game penalty takes more time off the clock than otherwise. So I don't know how that works because the clock stops after an offensive penalty. Well,
no. It comes at like because you could theoretically, like, if let's say an offense was trying to buy time, you could have committed a delay of game to purposely stop the clock. That's why they wind the clock on the ready for play after delay of game. So if you get called, if you're an offense and you get called for delay of game, as soon as they set the ball back down, they start the clock again because they don't want people using delay of game to stop the clock. He was using delay of game to run the clock out.
So just so I understand this correctly, if you have the ball, you can at the opposing 10-yard line, you could delay of game the clock all the way out the entire quarter.
Yeah, you probably could, unless the opposing coach wanted to call timeout.
I didn't know
if the opposing coach then called timeout, if it's coming out of a dead ball, the clock still stopped.
I've played Madden and NCAA a lot, and I've really wanted to run out the clock a lot. And every single time I get a delay game penalty, then that's it. I've got to run a play. So I didn't know that you could do that. So, okay, well, thanks for teaching me football, Andy.
Well, no, thank Bill Belichick and Mike Vrabel. But I do love that. I love when the guys know their history, understand how the rules work, and use that understanding of the rules in a big spot, because the stones it takes to do that. Now, I'll quit. The only quibble I'll have is why 12 and not 14 or 15? Because if you're going to do it and make it obvious, because you want to get called, like you want it to get called.
I think the answer to this question, I think the answer to your question is this, Andy. If you put 15 players on the field, that would look like a clown show. Like there would be, like, I think 12 can blend in. 15, I think it would be apparent to everybody, and you would probably increase the likelihood that Will Howard spikes the ball and it comes back to backfire.
Yeah, when my dad was a high school assistant football coach, and he was the girls basketball coach at the school, he coached the Powder Puff team one year, and his major strategic initiative for that game was, I'm going to play 12 players until someone notices. He made it half a quarter. So it's
every single time they call 12 men on the field while watching football, I did not recognize it on my own. I don't count quickly.
As Farrah says in the chat, Ohio State could have made a play and declined the penalty. Too much risk. That's why I say put 15 on the field. Because yes, with 12 players, when Emeka Ibuka and Jeremiah Smith are two of the receivers on the field, you actually still may get burned with 12 players. You probably need 15. But that's the only quibble I have. Otherwise, genius.
No, there's no reason to quibble because it worked, right? Like he knew the situation. He did something that worked. Like you can always go, well, what if somebody would have done this or somebody done that? Like the only thing you can analyze is, did the thing that you tried to do work? That's coaching, right? So, listen, I think that this guy is, not to keep blowing smoke up everyone, is one of the best coaches in college football in rising in the sport. I think that in 3 to 5 years, if not next year, we will consider him on the pantheon of the greats in the sport. And I think I would probably, venture to put him in my top 4 if I did a coaching list. Maybe we'll do that in the offseason and steal it from Bruce and Stu and then look at them in the eyes and be like, yeah, we stole that. We stole that.
We definitely stole that.
What's Stu going to do? What's Stewart going to do?
I'm worried about what Bruce is going to do. Have you seen how many pull-ups?
Yeah, that's true. I know, but it'd be me and you versus Bruce. Yeah.
So, Oregon, Dan Lanning's next responsibility. You covered a lot of Big Ten football, Ari. Dan Lanning now has to get a team ready to go to West Lafayette. So
it's a black hole. It's a black hole out there. If you go to West Lafayette on the wrong day, I don't know if that's my Ohio State brain, but there's a lot of weird things that go on in that little town.
So that's a Friday night game. Oregon is a 27.5-point favorite. I don't know that I want that I'm down on Oregon covering in this game. This could be full of grab ass, but I think Oregon probably wins it.
Yeah.
What a Friday night, Ari. You got Oregon, Purdue, and then you potentially eye-patched Mike Gundy in Provo.
Yeah, no, great appetizers this week. I think that Oregon might just be running off with it now. Like, I'm really impressed. The thing that I love about this is that if you go look at the box score of the Ohio State Oregon game, which I looked at extensively yesterday, statistically, like the two teams were identical, right? Like they played what I thought was pretty high level football on both sides of the ball. And you had two really good teams going at it in a game that was decided by 1 point. Like that Oregon is equipped to do that with Ohio State, with what that Ohio State team is built like if they are feeling themselves, Oregon, this is like, they should beat Purdue by like 50, right? Like, I mean, I don't know the emotion always of coming off of a big win, in a short week. I think you could kind of talk yourself into Oregon playing flat, but I think that I view what they did against Ohio State as the, turbo jet engine to like ascension into awesomeness. I would not want to be Purdue right now. Yeah.
I think there's more. See, I think you're being a prisoner of the moment. You're assuming that Oregon just rocket ship from here. That's not how 18 to 22-year-olds work, especially when they haven't been doing this the whole time.
Purdue is capital B bad, though.
They also went down 24 and forced overtime against Illinois last week. So it's not that they're having a moment here. All right, we'll see. I think it's going to be grab-ass central. Oregon's going to win. Just don't know by how much.
One last thing I want to say about Oregon. Can I do it?
Yeah.
So I think the stat of teams going on the West Coast from the Midwest or the East is like three
time zones. And basically, if you go to LA and play UCLA or USC, you win. And if you go the other direction, you lose. That's if you're UCLA going the other direction, you lose, basically.
Oh, so it's a fake stat?
Yeah, kind of fake.
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna make note is that Oregon has to go to the Midwest 3 times.
Yeah. The way you win is you take a bus 90 minutes before you get on the plane, and that settles your nerves. That's how you win.
To Harrisburg, and you get yourself a tasty cake. But the only point I was going to make is that Oregon does have to fly to the Midwest 3 times for the rest of this year, don't they? They've got to go to Wisconsin, they've got to go to Purdue this week, and they have got to go to Michigan. So maybe there's if you're a believer of the body clock thing, maybe there's something that could happen there.
We shall see. Ari,